thought. He's in a state of contemplation.
Yes.
That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I think we are on and we're recording. Great. Okay, let's begin. So lesson 10, the spatial sense and the fourth dimension. Couple of things that we're going to explore in this lesson. First, this concept of, well, first, this is a continuation of the topic that we started last week, which is called mindfulness, okay, or self-remembering, as we refer to it in the Gnostic tradition, and many yoga schools will use this term, self-remembering, and also the school of the fourth way, as I mentioned last week. And also, if you're familiar with this, the Theosophical Society, they use this terminology also. Self-remembering and self-observation, okay? So why do we want to do this? Because when we begin to, or actually, let me begin with the quote that I put here on the top, which is given to us by Samuel Gore. He says, "Only through the development of our internal perceptive powers can we study the superior dimensions of nature and of men." Okay, with the awakening of the sixth sense, the fourth dimensional world will open before us. Okay, so in other words, when we have these, what he's saying is that we have these internal perceptive powers. Okay, we have something called what many people refer to as the sixth sense, which gives us the ability to perceive more things than we're able to perceive with our five physical senses. Okay, and this was something that we covered last week, that we don't only have an external world, but there's also an internal world. Okay. And the nature also has dimensions let's say dimensions where life is manifesting at different, manifesting and expressing itself in different levels. Okay. Okay. And so the so-called spatial sense is that ability that the consciousness has, okay, to perceive space, to perceive time. Okay. And the fourth dimension is referred to as the dimension of time. But before we can really understand this, we have to understand a basic concept in esotericism and spirituality. Okay. And there is this concept that there is no such thing as solid objects. Okay. As a matter of fact, there is nothing that we can call an object. Okay. There are only events. Okay. And this is well expressed by the Buddha when he said that the only constant in the universe is change. There really is nothing that is solid and stable and steady. Okay. The Buddha. Right. So all of the objects that we see around us, okay, the computer, the table, the board, the walls, they seem like inanimate, stable objects to us, okay? But the truth of the matter is that we don't see we don't see the spatial and temporal dimension of those objects, meaning we only perceive the three-dimensional aspects of the objects, okay? But we don't see another factor that is there, that's time, meaning because we only see these objects as solid objects. But the truth is that the wall that is here is in a state of transition, right? The wall, the computer, our bodies are in movement. Okay? They are in a process of, we can say, of degeneration, actually. We are technically dying right now, right? You can say that as soon as we're born, we start dying, right? And so this is why the Buddha said there are no objects. Everything is ephemeral. Everything is in a state of transition, right? And so then the question is, what is matter, right? What is matter? And is there anything else to matter than what we observe or what we can see with our five physical senses, okay? And so according to the esoteric traditions, we say that matter, as we know it, or let's just say that we have an incomplete concept of what matter is. Okay. Again, we're only used to seeing the three-dimensional aspect of things, but there is a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, all the way up to an 11th dimension. Okay, so we're all multidimensional beings. We are multidimensional beings. The universe is a multidimensional being as well. Okay, and the way that I like to think about this, to give you an idea, is you are an organism, right? You and yourself, you are a universe. Okay, and within you, you have different little cells that work together, and they create, or all of them together are organs, right? And so there are certain organs that do certain things within our bodies, and then all of the work of all of those organs together create or give life to this being or to this physical body, okay? And so in the universe, we have the same thing. Now, when the macrocosm and the microcosm, yeah. As above, so below, right? As the Hermetic principle states, okay? So then, what is matter? And the closest, the scientist that got closest to this answer was Albert Einstein. So I put this formula that we've gone over before, E equals mc squared. What Albert Einstein was trying to say was that energy, okay, is equal to mass vibrating at the speed of light, okay? Or we can also say that matter, okay, is nothing other than energy vibrating at a certain speed, okay? And we've sort of explored this concept before, right? If we take a microscope and we go inside to see what's in here, you see that, you know, even though this looks solid, when you look into it, there's space in between all of these tissue, right? And there are cells, and then within those cells we find atoms. Within those atoms we find cells, atoms, molecules, okay? And eventually at the bottom of it, what we find is just pure energy, right? So when we really look into matter, we see that there is only energy, okay? There's only vibration, there's only light, okay? And so this is why Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of time, frequency, and vibration, okay? So in other words, there is a fourth dimensional aspect to things that is referred to as time, the temporal aspect of something. And that allows us to become more aware of what life is, okay? Life or things happen in a very slow manner in our life, and we don't realize this doesn't allow us to really connect with things. Let me give an example, okay? When you buy ice cream, okay, and you're gonna eat that ice cream, you start eating it. You know that that's gonna be gone in a few minutes, right? And so you do your best and you focus and you're very present with it and you enjoy it, okay? And you know that that ice cream's not gonna be there forever. You know you're only gonna have it for a few moments, so you enjoy it and then you let it go, right? Or maybe you get another ice cream. All right, but this is important. So your perception of that object is that you're going to enjoy that for a few moments. It's going to serve its purpose and it's going to go away, right? And it's very easy for you to not get attached to that ice cream, okay? So let's expand on that concept, okay? So life and everything around us is the same. Everything around us is in a state of transition. Everything around us emanated, okay? And is here with us for a little bit, and then it's going to disappear. Our own physical body, this is the same thing. The same thing will happen to our physical body, okay? There is only one thing that is transcendental, meaning that is not subject to space and time, that will never die, that will never fade, and that is consciousness. Huh?
I was thinking
okay. Consciousness, okay, consciousness, soul, essence, okay? That is the one thing about us and about and about the universe that will always be here, that will always be present, okay? And so when we begin to realize this, and we begin to, well, not only realize it, but to experience ourselves as souls, as essences, as an immaterial, transcendental being, then we will look at all of life as something that is temporal, something that is here for, or that we're here for a particular moment with one defined purpose, which I'll let you guys figure it out, right? We say that the purpose of life is to awaken, to know, right? This is why we came here. But then life will fade away. So then there is a certain usefulness to this physical reality, right? There is a usefulness for this body, okay? And so from a spiritual perspective, what we're trying to do is to try to realize what the purpose of being here is, okay? And so when we begin through the techniques of meditation, of mindfulness, of self-observation, of self-remembering, we begin to observe life, we come to the realization and of why we're here and what the purpose of this here. And then once you realize that, you begin to dedicate your life to that completely. This is why you see, you know, all of the different saints and enlightened people in history that have always sort of pointed towards transcendental. They came here to remind us, right, that our true life and the true essence of life lies within the transcendental, within our soul, within our essence. And that this physical reality is only a sort of school for us as souls, okay? So, what is matter? There is no such thing as matter as we know it, right? And so we can begin to say that then there is much more to matter and there's much more to life than meets the eye, right? Scientists are now talking about not only matter, but dark matter and antimatter, right? And they say that dark matter, I'm missing another one. I think I'm missing another one. Dark matter, dark energy, dark matter, and then antimatter, right? And they say that only about like 5% of what we call matter is what makes the universe. The rest of it is dark matter. I think the biggest one is dark matter, and this dark energy.
Would antimatter be the abyss, pretty much?
I haven't thought of that. I haven't thought of.
I've been studying like the electric universe and stuff, so like I feel like antimatter would be the abyss, maybe.
I have no idea. You know, I've never give it thought. I've never investigated that. I thought that antimatter is sort of the opposite of matter, so it's like a different dimension. Could be. I don't know. That's a good question. I'll look into it. And so anyway, so the point is, we don't know, or we know very, very, very little of what life is. Okay. And so the spiritual traditions are trying to tell us that the universe and life is bigger than we ever thought, okay? You are bigger than your body. You're bigger than your emotions. You're bigger than your mind, okay? You are an infinite transcendental being that is only here for a particular amount of time for a particular reason, okay? And so one of the main things in spirituality is to help us identify ourselves or remember ourselves as transcendental beings, because we are currently too identified with the three-dimensional space of things, okay? So life, our physical life has become like that ice cream from the first example, and we think that this is all there is, and so we focus all of our attention in this body to this physical external world with all of its sensations, and whatever it provides to us. And we completely forget that there is something else. And we live today, we live every day like we're gonna actually live forever, because everything looks so, what's the word? Huh? I couldn't hear that. Everything looks comfortable and stable. It's what I'm trying to say.
That's a good.
Stable. And we think, we think that we're going to be here forever, right? When we're young, forever. We think we're going to live forever, right? And even the concept of time is, we experience time in a slower manner when we are young, right? Remember what a year used to be like?
Yes, yeah. We got a whole year off for summer.
Yeah.
It felt like a year.
Exactly. And now years like, shoot, can't believe I'm 35 already. I was just like 20, And
the older you get, the quicker it goes.
right.
It's true.
Usually I think because, and here we begin to see the relativity of time, right? The more consciousness that there is, time sort of speeds up, okay? When there is more consciousness, you begin to realize, you become more conscious of your surroundings and everything that's happening, and you actually begin to see that your perception of things are very, might not be objective, okay? And so this is why Albert Einstein also said that time is curved and is relative, okay? We have this idea that time is very linear, and it is actually a very limited way of looking at time. Even scientists say that, we have like, the beginning was the Big Bang, and then everything just sort of like time began to expand, and it will continue to go forever and ever and ever and ever, right? In spiritual terms, we have a different perspective of time. We say that time is actually curved, okay? That the beginning is the end, okay? That there is no beginning and there is no end. Everything has always been, will always be, which is very hard for the intellectual mind or the sensual mind to sort of grasp, okay? And so we need to experience ourselves as atemporal beings, okay? And that's one of the qualities of the awakened consciousness. When we awaken the sixth sense, this so-called spatial sense, we begin to experience ourselves beyond a three-dimensional being. We begin to experience this sort of eternal aspect of ourselves, okay? Okay. So this is why Samuel Weor says that when we develop those internal perceptive powers, we can really begin to study the superior dimensions of nature, and I added, and of men, okay? We can begin to study, we can begin to realize, right, that matter is vibrating at different speeds, and that this level is vibrating, these molecules are vibrating, at the speed that we can perceive them with our physical eyes, okay? But there are other molecules, there are other beings here and now that possess bodies, whose atoms, whose molecules are vibrating at higher speeds, so we cannot perceive them, okay? In all traditions, they're always referred to as ghosts, as spirits, as gods, as devas, as angels, and so forth, okay? So it is not to say that, it's not to say that when we think of dimensions, we usually think that this is one dimension, and there's another dimension over here, and then there's another one over here, or that there's one here and then one on top of the other, okay? That's not the reality. The reality is that the sense of dimensions depends on our ability to perceive. Everything is here and now, okay? Everything is vibrating at different frequencies, and some we can perceive and some we can't, okay? So think of this concept of the multidimensionality of life as an onion, okay? Where the center, the onion has layers and layers and layers, okay? And they're all connected, they're all part of the same thing, okay? When you're in the center, as you begin to expand your awareness, you see the center, then you expand your awareness a little bit, and then you see the other layer, and you see the other layer, and so forth, okay? So when we begin to open our spatial sense, we begin to feel, as we experienced in the meditation last week, as I mentioned, we begin to become more aware of our body, right? You begin to feel your body, and then you begin to feel the body's energy. Okay, you begin to feel your body like energy, like molecules vibrating in space. Okay, and then as you continue to awaken that spatial sense or to expand that spatial sense, you begin to realize, you begin to experience that there's even much more than your physical body. There are other types of vibration that are floating around, so you become more receptive to other types of emotions, superior emotions, other types of thoughts, okay, which is what we call, when we open the superior aspects of the mind, you begin to experience higher thoughts, transcendental ideas, okay? Eventually taking you to experiencing what in the Buddhist tradition they refer to as the illuminating void, okay, or the oneness, okay, in which you completely immerse yourself, you expand your spatial sense to such a degree that you can actually experience, feel, sense everything at once. You experience the totality of life, okay? Okay, and so that is why Samael says that when we begin to open our internal perceptions, we can begin to perceive more of that, okay? And from a psychological point of view, this is important because it allows us to understand ourselves better, right? When we begin to expand our spatial sense, we begin to see more of ourselves. We begin to see what's happening within our own internal worlds, right? We begin to see our psychology. And we begin to understand why we have the life that we have, right? Remember that one of the foundational concepts in Gnosticism and spirituality is that you attract everything with your internal levels of being, with your internal states, right? And so if you want to change your life, you have to change yourself. But in order to change yourself, you have to see yourself. You have to see what you need to change within yourself, right? And so when we begin to practice what we call the intimate self-remembering and self-observation, then we awaken that aspect of being which is called consciousness or awareness, okay? Which is very different than the intellect, as we explained in the previous classes, right? The intellect is one aspect of being, awareness is another aspect of being, okay? Rarely are we actually aware, okay? And we'll talk more about this next week, okay? And so when the awakening of the consciousness happens, then our perceptions expand, okay? And I have a little diagram there that you can't really see here, but I'm going to expand on that, okay? Because we talked a little bit about this last week, but I want to make sure that we understand it better this week, okay? So, by the way, I have a little note over here that there's something called hyperspace, okay? You've always heard things like levitations, teletransportations, astral projections, all of those things, okay? Those things are real, okay, because those things are things that we can experience, things that we can do when we allow, or when we awaken our consciousness and we begin to elevate the vibration of all of our bodies, our physical body, our energetic body, our emotions, our mind, and the energies of will. When we begin to rise the vibration of all of the molecules of those bodies, we actually begin to become lighter beings, okay? And this is why we hear of witches flying through space, you know, and things disappearing or appearing or ghosts materializing and so forth. All of those phenomena are simply beings or bodies that decrease their vibration and become visible in this world, or beings that increase their vibration and begin to levitate and begin to teletransport themselves to different places, or even project their consciousness to other places and see what's happening there and so forth. Okay, so these things are very real, but
viewing is real, but like you can't really like move your
No, in remote viewing, you're only
Yeah, that is
sending your mind to the place.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Right. Yeah.
If we're always increasing our vibration to a higher level to experience these other things, is there anything that exists at a lower vibration level beneath, or is everything up?
Yeah, in one direction.
Yes. Good question. If you guys, I don't know if you guys heard Jacob's question, but he's saying, you know, if we increase our vibration, or are there only vibrations that are going up or dimensions that are going up? Are there any that are below us at a lower vibration? Yeah, and the answer is yes. This is why all of the different traditions talk about hell.
Oh, so all the bad stuff is down from where we thought.
All the bad stuff is below, all the good stuff is above.
Okay.
I don't really like to use those terms, good and bad, but for the purpose of answering the question, let's say yes, okay? So yeah, that's what's referred to as demonic entities, okay, or evil entities, and so forth, okay? We'll say that there is a superior astral world and an inferior astral world, okay? But we're gonna talk more about that in the next few classes, okay? This is why all of the different traditions have this concept of hell and of heaven, right? Which here and now, what that means in a practical sense is that we have higher levels of being and inferior levels of being, okay? There are states of being that are godlike and states of being that are demonic-like. For instance, anger, pride, lust, all of those things, according to the traditions, are inferior or demonic types of, levels of being or states of being, okay? And as you ascend, as you elevate the vibration of your consciousness, you align yourself with higher and higher emotions, higher and higher ways of thinking and ways of being, okay? Okay, so that's what we call hyperspace or the jinn states. Okay, the jinn states are when objects or beings are able to elevate their physical vibration and penetrate into what we call the fourth dimension, okay, or the dimension of time. Okay, the fourth dimension is also referred to as the memories of nature. Okay, when we consciously penetrate into the fourth dimension, we can see into the past, we can see into the future, because the past and the future become one. Okay, the future is already written, as well as the past, obviously. And in this dimension, or in this state of consciousness, okay, in a fourth dimensional state of consciousness, we can perceive the future, and we can remember the past, okay? This is why you have, you know, in all of the different traditions, you have, what's the word? People like Nostradamus that predict the future and that kind of stuff, right? And I don't know if you probably, maybe some of you have had prophetic dreams where what you dream literally comes true, or deja vus are great examples of this, okay, where you actually live something that you've never physically lived, but you think you already lived it, right? And all of this, so the deja vus are clear examples of how our consciousness sometimes penetrates into this fourth dimension. It takes a peek into the future, like a lived experience. It could be in a dream, or it can be just in a moment, okay, of awakened consciousness. You sort of peek into the future right before it happens, okay? And some deja vus are pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting if it happens.
Yeah.
That's what you had.
And so what happens is, you know, and we'll talk about this later, we'll talk about karma and destiny and all that, but it's sort of like we already have a destiny that's written, and by peeking into it, you can change it, you know, and that's sort of, again, that's sort of the whole concept behind the movie Back to the Future. Remember when they go back and they say, like, anything that you do will actually affect your present, which is the future then, right? And so that's the whole point of awakening your consciousness, because you can actually begin to change your mechanical destiny, right? And so, and again, you know, we'll talk more about all of those things. And if I forget to talk about them, remind me, okay? Because there's so many things that we got to talk about. All right. So if that sounds interesting, if that sounds like something you want to do, and you want to peek into, okay, then the technique is what is referred to as mindfulness, okay, or what we refer to in the Gnostic tradition is intimate self-remembering, okay? And so we talked a little bit of this last week, or we explained what self-remembering is, okay? So intimate self-remembering is when you are consciously remembering yourself. You are trying to reconnect with yourself. You're trying to reconnect with self, okay? And that's what's called self-remembering. And it's about remembering who you are. So that implies, right, that right now, or before you are in that state, you are not remembering yourself, right? You are sort of lost, okay? You are in a state of forgetfulness or in a state of sleep, okay? And so that's why the invitation from all of the different spiritual masters to awake, okay? So let's say that right now we are in a state of sleep. We don't remember who we are. We don't know who we are. We only know a very small aspect of ourselves, okay? And so we want to get to that state, okay? So the way to get to the intimate self-remembering is by beginning to observe ourselves, okay? So we're going to use our senses to begin to observe and become aware of what we're experiencing, okay? So we're going to use our sense of hearing, sight, taste, everything, all the five senses, to begin to become aware of who I am, what am I experiencing in this moment, okay? And when you take a moment and you stop and you begin to observe, you begin to awaken something that is called awareness, okay? Begin to feel that your sense of awareness, your sense of self begins to slowly increase. All of a sudden, you begin to feel more of yourself, more of your body. You become aware of the emotions that you're feeling, the physical state of your body, whether you're tired, whether you're stressed, whether you're hyper, whatever it is, right? Then you also become aware of thoughts. You become aware of how your mind is thinking, what your mind is thinking, okay, which is creating emotions, which is creating desire to do certain things, okay? So as you're doing this, you awaken what we call the consciousness, which is simply awareness, okay? Samael says that consciousness is man, it's going away right now. Consciousness is a particular type of apprehension of inner knowledge, okay? So when you are in a conscious state, you're apprehending knowledge. You're apprehending or becoming one with something, okay? And that becoming one with something is whatever you're focusing on, whether it is your body, you're experiencing more of your body, you're feeling your body, you're feeling life within you, and so forth, okay? When the consciousness awakens, then your perceptions expand. Not only your physical senses, not only your physical perceptions, but your inner senses begin to expand, okay? And we have inner senses. We have intuition, we have clairvoyance, telepathy, what else? Clairvoyance, telepathy, intuition, Telepathy, I said telepathy, right? So clairvoyance, clairaudience, which is to hear more. Those are the sort of the qualities of the inner chakras, okay? Intuition, telepathy, and then there is harmonious relations with the environment, harmonious relations with other people, okay? And then there is what's called polyvision, which is to be able to see the totality of life, and that's when we experience that oneness or samadhi, etc. Okay, so you begin to expand all of your perceptions, your external senses and your internal senses. Okay, and then you begin to actually see who you really are.
exercises you could do to like to enhance this?
Yes.
Not you get to that?
Yes. Okay. That exercise that you're referring to is what we call self-observation. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. Let me make sure that I'm sharing the right one with you. This one. Okay. So self-observation. Okay. Last week I said that there was something called, that we have to practice something called the divided attention. Okay. And this is an aspect of self-observation. Okay. So how do you expand your senses? How do you train your ability to see? By seeing, right? By observing attentively. That's how we develop these powers. So think of this sixth sense or the special sense as a muscle that you haven't been using. Okay? Right? And so the way that we awaken these senses is by actually practicing them. Okay? And that's what the lesson number 12 is about, learning how to listen, learning how to see things, learning how to observe. Okay, so in the first diagram, up in the top, we see, it says fascination. This is usually the way that we actually observe life, okay? See if we can understand this. So this is you, okay? When you see a tree, you see the tree, and as soon as you see the tree, the concept tree comes into your mind, right? And whatever experiences you have of trees, whether you love trees, whether you hate trees, and so forth, right? Okay, so let's change this, okay? Let's say you're a Christian, and then all of a sudden you see a Muslim symbol, okay? As soon as you see the symbol, you don't stay neutral, right? What happens? Thoughts come into your mind, emotions, and then actions. So you're not really seeing the symbol for it, what it is. You're adding on to whatever it is, okay? So you see Muslim symbol, or if you're a Muslim, you see a cross, all of a sudden you get these negative feelings, okay? And that's what we call a state of fascination. You're fascinated because in that moment you're sleeping. Your consciousness is sleeping. You're not really seeing objectively reality, okay? A cross is just a cross, right? All right. So most of us are in this state most of the time because everything that we're observing, we're judging, we're labeling, we are interpreting, we're adding on to what it is and so forth, okay? Okay, so that's our current state. The second state is the beginning of awakening the consciousness, okay? And in this state, what we do is the attention goes towards the object of observation, and we also pay attention to what's coming back, okay? So in the first example, you see something, and your thoughts go, and you're not even aware that the tree or that object is producing thoughts inside of your mind and emotions, okay? You're completely fascinated with the event. In the second state, we divide our attention, okay? And we begin to see that that external object creates or triggers things within me, thoughts and emotions and actions. So what happens is our attention divides between the object and the observer. Right? So we're not only observing the object, but we're also observing ourselves, right? And so now you see that what happens, you need a lot of attention, you need a lot of focus because there are more things happening than before, okay? There are things happening outside of you and things happening within you. So you begin to sort of divide your attention and your perception expands. Before it was all the way out, and now it's also inside. Okay? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you are actually seeing more than you saw before. Right? You're seeing how your thoughts are defining who you are in that moment and so forth. Okay? So that's what we call observation. We're observing ourselves as we observe, if you want to put it another way. If you want to send that. If we do that long enough, question before we move on?
No.
Okay. If we do that long enough, that turns into what we call self-remember. Okay? The sun here represents consciousness, represents awareness. Okay? So now we have attention that goes out, it goes back in, and we become aware of what's happening.
First parrot mark.
You're thinking about the fool? Or the magician?
Yeah, the magician.
Okay.
Like the consciousness on top, the
Right.
male on the one side and female on the other,
Mhm.
female on the other, and you get
Yeah.
do with this, but what's it kind of reminds you of?
So that sun, the sun always represents light, represents consciousness, represents awareness, spirit, so forth. Truth, right? And so this is the tricky one to actually explain. Because this is a very particular state of being. Self-remembering is a state of being that transcends mind, that transcends physical, and it contains all of that. It contains your physical sense of self, but it includes your transcendental sense of self. Okay? So when you enter into this state, now there is a new type of awareness where you are very receptive to everything that is happening within you. Okay? And so that's what we call the awakening of the consciousness. So how do you get here? Is by learning how to observe. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so you're pretty much doing the second one, and after time you get to the third one.
Yeah, and this you'll flow in and out of these two. First, you got to get to this. First, you got to consciously observe things.
The first one, basically, you're looking at something and you're projecting how you feel onto that object, and it's a one-way street. Nothing's allowed to come back.
Right.
And the second one is like there's a two-way street. Now you're observing it. You're also
Seeing it,
not just projecting how you feel. How you let it, yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
There's a sense of connection here between you and your external world, where here there isn't.
It's a one-way street. That's a two-way
Right. Here you're separate. You're like, I'm here and the tree is over here. But you begin to realize that these two things are related because we trigger things off of each other. Right? And so then that allows you to, once you do that, you begin to feel, if you stay present in your heart, you try to, that's another thing, we have to sort of begin to train ourselves to not only see things, but to feel life. Okay? And that's when we enter into here. The sun represents the heart too. Okay? Which is also Leo, the lion, the heart. Okay? And so we have to go from, I'm going to say, intellectually observing our world into feeling our world, into feeling life. Okay? And that's where awareness comes into place. Okay? So we begin to divide our attention. We see what's outside. We see the things that are triggered within me. And then you begin to see those thoughts. You begin to feel those emotions, and you feel your physical body. And then you notice that there is an awareness that is on top of all of that, aware of the thoughts, aware of the emotions, and aware of the physical body. That's what we call awareness. That's what we call self-remembering. Okay? There is if you go to YouTube, there is a wonderful explanation of this by, what's his name? The guy from Ace Ventura? Jim Carrey. He says, one day I'm sitting in meditation, I'm just sitting there, and I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, but he says, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I become aware of my thoughts. I become aware that there are thoughts. And then I ask myself, wait a second, if I can see my thoughts, if I can become aware of my thoughts, then who am I? Right? So it's almost like the thought is an independent external thing that's happening. And that's how we should begin to see our thoughts and our emotions as external things that are emanating from something else, right? And that something else is pure awareness. And he says, in that moment, as I experience this, I experienced myself as the awareness that was behind the thought. I was thrown into the cosmos. I was thrown into this state in which there was just infinite space. There was no separation between anything, right? And that's what we call self-remembering. That's what we call the third state of consciousness, or the state of illumination, right? And so in that state, we're able to really begin to perceive life as it really is, and how everything is connected, okay? All right.
Is this similar to like the 3 minds that we did? There's the 3 different steps.
That's an interesting connection. I never thought of it.
I feel like this graph could be like almost like a simile for that, where you have 3 different states of
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, I can see the central mind here being completely fascinated, the intermediate mind here analyzing, and then the interior mind actually experiencing reality. Yeah.
The tarot card I was talking about was the Empress. It's the one that sits on Bina.
The Empress, okay.
Yeah, it's the one because you need like the male and the
Right,
female.
yeah.
That's
Right.
the one that sits on Bina on the columns. The tree.
Yeah, because the magician is just a magician. It's just one.
To Bina, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I hope that clarifies things a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we do this in practice? Okay. The conversations that you have with everyone around. Okay. Start to pay attention to how the words of the speaker make you feel and the thoughts that those words create. Okay? And then, as you're doing that, because you're still trying to pay attention to what that person is saying, observe the feelings, observe the emotions, observe the thoughts that begin to emanate, but also begin to become aware of the fact that there is a sort of new you within that is seeing these things now, that is seeing the thoughts that are emanating, and that is feeling these emotions. Okay, usually emotions are very easy. We can feel them, and we can physically feel them. Thoughts, we never really see them as much, or in other words, let's say we're sort of daydreaming a lot, and we never catch ourselves until we leave that state of dream, right? If you're daydreaming, you're over there, and you're not present. You're not really being, right? And then when you come back, what happens? As soon as you come back from a daydream or from a distraction, the first thing that you feel is you feel more life. You feel more aliveness within you. You feel more present, more aware, right? And that's what happens here. So when you begin to observe outside and observe yourself at the same time, there's a new sense of awareness, a new sense of aliveness within yourself. Okay? I highly recommend reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He describes this beautifully. There are videos on YouTube about him describing how to be present, what being present is. And the more that you hear about it, the more that you read about it, excuse me, the easier that it becomes for you to understand it. Because you can begin to see it from different angles, okay? There's also a really great book that's called Self-Remembering, okay? By Errol Burton. Okay, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Self-Remember. Very easy to remember, okay? Actually, it's called Self-Remembering, not Self-Remember. Self-Remember, okay? Maybe I'll try to put a link on the website with the PDFs and stuff so you guys can get it, okay? Okay, cool. So in the meditation practice, we're going to do all of these things, okay, to get here. Another very simple way of experiencing this is sort of one of the ways that I always try to practice this throughout the day is that when I'm walking, okay, I actually begin to feel every step as I'm walking. And I feel my foot on the ground and then the next one, okay? And as I am aware of that, I try to actually feel it. I feel like my foot is an extension of my heart. So to feel the ground with your foot, like when you hug someone and you actually feel them, right? You usually feel in your heart. Do the same, right? Touch a wall and feel it with your heart, okay? The sense that's connected to the heart chakra is actually the sense of touch, okay? That tells us something, okay? That gives us this sense that everything is oneness, everything is united. Through touch, we can literally unite with everything, okay? This is also why you see, people praying like this, usually with their hands together, because it creates this sort of loop of energy, okay? This, usually this, right? It's usually or like this in the heart, right? It creates a loop, okay? And it connects with the heart. And it creates a flow of energy that activates the heart. Another way is also to sort of walk with your hand and your heart, okay? And as you walk, you're aware of the feeling that arises in your heart as you're walking. When you do this, you begin to realize that your thoughts sort of calm down and your attention comes here, and you're also paying attention to where you are. It's a great way to divide your attention, right? You're paying attention to where you're walking, and you're also paying attention to what's happening inside of where you're feeling.
Basically, you're living in the moment and trying to see how it makes you feel inside and actually acknowledging.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging everything that's happening, external and internal. How you're feeling inside, and as you're doing that, you begin to see that you become aware of the fact that, you sort of begin to tap into who your real self is. Because we have this idea that we are the body, right? And so we begin to think about it. We know that the body, again, it's in a constant state of transformation, okay? The body is here now. It's not going to be there, in a few decades, hopefully, maybe a century, okay? But you are still you, right? And you still have the same sense of self that you had when you were a kid. You still feel like the same person, right? Some things have changed, but your sense of self, of me, is still the same. That is the real transcendental you that never changes, okay? What changes is your body. Your emotions change, right? Throughout the day, throughout your life, throughout the weeks, right? And so self-observation allows us to become aware of that, become aware of the fact that I am not my emotions, that emotions come and go, right? And I am not those emotions. I am something that is behind that. I am the awareness that is behind that. You are not your thoughts. You are not the way that you think, right? And so forth. So self-observation, little by little, begins to penetrate into who we really are, beyond the body, beyond the emotions, beyond the thoughts, and then you enter into the state where you are, and you have this complete sense of being, this complete sense of self, which is what's referred to as mindfulness or self-remembering. All right, cool. So I hope that you have some very tangible practices. Okay, so this is why meditation helps, because in meditation we begin to increase our ability, or we begin to expand our senses, right? Little by little, we expand our senses, our sense of the body, and we begin to actually feel more of our body, see more of our body, and then see more of our emotions, of our thoughts, and finally tapping into the self, into the I am, right? All right, so let's do this.
We at the halfway mark of our semester, do an entire day class of a recap.
Recap of all the classes?
Yeah, just a short recap.
Sure. I've actually done that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's 1 to 10, you pay for it.
Right.
You'd be like,
Yeah, I'm up for that. We actually
"On your piece of something, just like a recap, you know?
we actually did that with the group with the previous group because there were some people that came in like halfway into the program, and we all sort of sat down here
It's
and
like a 1 whole day kind of thing.
yeah, we did. I
Like
would
an
think.
hour, and I'm like, I want more.
Yeah. No, I feel like we did something like 6 hours or something like that,
Yeah.
and we'll do some meditation and stuff. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I like that.
Cool. All right, wonderful. So let's meditate, okay? Because that's how we really begin to expand our senses. Because when we meditate, or the act of sitting down to meditate allows us to focus, right? When we're out in the world, our attention is we're not able to focus very well, and so meditation allows us to train our ability to focus and to concentrate, okay? And then once you do that, the rest is easy. Okay. Once you learn to focus your attention, to concentrate, then you automatically enter into that state of self-remembering and that state of being. Okay. Okay. Cool. And I'll I don't know if you need me to upload this picture too, but I'll upload the picture on the website. Okay, cool. Hey Owen, welcome. I'm glad you made it.